When a person, company, or society has an absolute advantage over another, it can make more of the same product with the same or fewer resources. Everyone and every group is good at different things. Most likely, writers can write better than bakers. Artists don't know as much as construction workers about how to build a house. Some people or groups have an edge over others when it comes to making a good or service. Absolute advantage is an economic term for when one person or group can make the same amount of a product as another person or group while using less resources. This is different from comparative advantage, which describes a situation in which one person or group can produce at a lower opportunity cost. Let's say that both Abby and Joe own general stores and make things to sell in them. Both sell homemade quilts. Abby can use 5 square yards of fabric to make a quilt. For a quilt the same size, Joe needs 7 square yards of fabric. Abby has a clear advantage over Joe when it comes to making quilts in this situation. She can make the same number of quilts with less raw material. When you go to a store and see a sale, you can buy the same number of items you usually buy without spending as much money as you usually do. Absolute advantage is similar. If you have an absolute advantage over another producer, you can make more goods or services with less cash or raw materials. How does absolute advantage work? Absolute advantage is an economic term that means one company can make a good or service for less money than another company. If you want to put it another way, the producer with absolute advantage can make more units of a product with the same number of inputs than the other producer. It has to do with how efficient each party is at making things. The more efficient producer has a clear advantage. Adam Smith, an economist, wrote an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations in 1776. In that book, he talked about the idea of absolute advantage. In the book, he argued that the best way for a country to get rich is to focus on making things that they do better than anyone else, and to allow free international trade so that it can sell the things it makes and buy the things it needs. By focusing on the things it does best, the country can make the most of its production capacity and create the most value. It can use the money it makes from trade to buy other products that it can't make as well at home. This idea is different from mercantilism, which was the most popular economic theory and practice at the time. Under mercantilism, countries try to keep trade to a minimum and make everything they need inside their own borders. Most of the time, economists use absolute advantage to compare countries, but it can also be used to compare any two regions. For example, even though Nebraska and Massachusetts are both in the same country, Nebraska might be better at making corn than Massachusetts. What does absolute advantage look like? In the real world, oil production is a good example of an absolute advantage. When it comes to making oil, countries in the Middle East have a huge advantage. In countries with a lot of oil, businesses can use simple, cheap ways to drill for the resource and get a lot of it. In other places, like the US, like offshore drilling, oil production is more expensive and takes more work. Many countries in Central and South America have a huge advantage when it comes to growing coffee. The weather in these areas is perfect for growing coffee, which makes it much easier for coffee seeds to grow into plants that can make money. With its cold weather, a country like Canada might not be able to grow any coffee at all. If it could, it would have to grow in places with expensive climate control. When it comes to mining copper, Chile and Zambia are both far ahead of the rest of the world. Both countries have a lot of copper on their land, which makes it easy for them to build big mines where they can get a lot of the metal. What does absolute cost advantage mean? The theory of absolute cost advantage says that two countries will only trade with each other if one country is better at making a product than the other. For example, country A won't trade its coffee for country B's copper unless country A has a clear advantage when it comes to making coffee and country B has a clear advantage when it comes to making copper. What's good and bad about having an absolute advantage? The theory of absolute advantage is useful because it can help countries be as productive and efficient as possible. If one country is better than all the others at making one product, then putting all of that country's resources into making that product is good for the whole world. When the country that makes something sells it to other countries, it gets the most money for its work and can buy anything else it needs. The theory of absolute advantage, on the other hand, has many flaws. One is that the theory depends on trade between countries being truly free. In reality, this doesn't happen very often because tariffs, quotas, and other things make it hard for regions to trade with each other. Even if one country can make a product cheaper than its neighbors, trade restrictions can make it more cost-effective for those neighbors to make the product themselves. They might even use tariffs on purpose to protect businesses in their own country from the other country's advantage. Another problem is that putting all of a country's resources into making just one good is not possible and could be dangerous. Even if a region is the best at making a certain product, it's not a good idea to put all of its resources into making that product if it's not in high demand. For example, uranium can be used to power nuclear power plants, but there are only about 440 reactors in the world. If a country with an absolute advantage put all of its resources into mining uranium, it could quickly meet demand and end up with a lot of uranium it can't sell. The theory of absolute advantage also says that there are only two people and two goods involved in trade. In reality, international trade is much more complicated. Most countries trade with dozens of other countries and exchange hundreds or thousands of different things. How do you figure out how big an absolute advantage is? To figure out a region's absolute advantage, you need to know how much it costs to make something and how much that thing can be sold for. Then, compare the production capacity of one area to the production capacity of another, assuming that both areas use the same inputs. Harry and Sally, for example, both like to knit and sell handmade scarves from their homes. They use the same raw materials and buy them from the same store for the same price. This means that the only difference in how much work goes into making a scarf is how long it takes. In 20 hours, Harry can make 5 scarves and Sally can make 4 scarves. In this case, Harry has a clear advantage because in the same amount of time, he can make 1 more scarf than Sally. In other words, he makes 1 scarf every 4 hours, and Sally makes 1 every 5 hours. When it comes to making scarves, Sally is 80% as good as